The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my auto shop at exactly 11:47 p.m. when Amanda walked in wearing that black dress that cost more than most people's rent. She didn't even glance at the '92 Mustang I'd been working on for the past 6 hours, just stood there in her designer heels, purse clutched like a weapon, rolling her eyes before I even opened my mouth. "Don't start, Jake," she said, checking her makeup in her phone's camera. "I'm already running late." I wiped my hands on the shop rag, feeling the familiar knot in my stomach that had become my Friday night companion for the past 3 months. "It's almost midnight, Amanda. We talked about this. I thought maybe we could grab dinner tomorrow, spend some time together without your new work friends for once." The laugh that escaped her lips was sharp enough to cut glass. "Jesus, Jake, you sound like my father. I'm 34 years old, not some teenager with a curfew." She adjusted her earrings, those expensive dangly things that caught the fluorescent light. "I work hard all week selling houses to rich assholes who think they know better than me. Friday nights are my time to unwind." "Our time," I corrected, setting the wrench down carefully on my workbench. "Remember when Friday nights used to be our time? We'd order Chinese food, watch those terrible horror movies you pretend to hate but secretly love, maybe open a bottle of wine and just talk about our week." Amanda's reflection in the Mustang's side mirror showed her expression shifting from annoyed to something colder. "That was before I started making real money, Jake. Before I realized there's a whole world out there beyond this grease pit and your collection of vintage car magazines." The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. "So, what are you saying exactly?" She turned to face me fully, and for a moment I saw a flash of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that hard look she'd perfected since joining Pinnacle Real Estate 6 months ago. "I'm saying you need to stop being so controlling. I'm not asking for permission to have a life outside this relationship." She gestured around the shop with obvious disdain. "Some of us have ambitions beyond fixing broken-down cars for people who can barely afford to keep them running." "Controlling?" The word came out louder than I intended, echoing off the metal walls. "I asked if you wanted to spend time together. That's not controlling. That's called being in a relationship." Amanda checked her phone again, and I caught a glimpse of several unread texts from someone named Brent. The name was new, but the secretive way she angled the screen away from me was becoming familiar. "Look, if you don't like me clubbing every Friday, you know where the door is," she said, grabbing her purse and heading toward the exit. "I'm not changing who I am just because you're threatened by my success." The shop door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows, leaving me alone with the smell of motor oil and the sudden, crushing silence. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, her words echoing in my head like a broken record. "You know where the door is." I looked around the shop that had been my life for the past 8 years. At the tools my father had left me, at the Mustang that belonged to Mrs. Henderson down the street who trusted me to keep her late husband's pride and joy running. Then I thought about our apartment across town, filled with my furniture, my books, my life carefully arranged around someone who apparently saw it all as an obstacle to her new identity. "You know where the door is. The thing about doors is that they swing both ways." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my brother's number. Matt answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Jake, what's wrong? It's almost midnight." "I need a favor," I said, walking toward the office where I kept a few changes of clothes for late nights at the shop. "I need to borrow your truck. Tonight." "Tonight? Jesus, what happened?" "Amanda made something very clear to me," I said, pulling on a clean t-shirt. "And I think it's time I listened." Matt was quiet for a moment. He'd never liked Amanda, thought she was using me as a safety net while she climbed her social ladder. He'd been too polite to say it directly, but I'd seen it in his eyes during family dinners, the way he watched her check her phone constantly or dismiss my stories about work. "You need help moving?" he asked finally. "Yeah, I need help moving." "Give me 20 minutes. I spent those 20 minutes walking through the shop, making sure everything was secure for the weekend. I'd built this business from nothing after Dad died, turned it from a 2-bay operation into something that actually paid the bills. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it was mine. Amanda had called it a grease pit. Matt pulled up in his F-150 just as I was locking the front door. He looked exactly like what he was, a construction foreman who'd been woken up in the middle of the night by his younger brother's relationship crisis. Flannel shirt thrown over pajama pants, work boots unlaced, hair sticking up at odd angles. "You sure about this?" he asked as I climbed into the passenger seat. "She told me where the door was," I said. Seemed rude not to use it. The drive to the apartment took 15 minutes through empty streets. Amanda and I had lived there for 2 years, a decent 2-bedroom place in a complex that tried hard to be upscale without quite making it. The rent was reasonable, the neighbors were quiet, and it was close enough to my shop that I could walk to work when the weather was nice. I used my key for what I knew would be the last time. The apartment looked exactly like what it was, a space where two people had tried to build a life together. My leather couch sat across from her glass coffee table. My vintage movie posters hung next to her abstract art prints. My books filled the shelves she'd insisted we buy from that expensive furniture store downtown. "Where do we start?" Matt asked, surveying the living room. "Everything that's mine," I said. "Which is pretty much everything except her clothes and that coffee table?" We worked in efficient silence, the way we'd learned growing up in a house where our father believed in teaching his sons to be useful. Matt had inherited Dad's talent for construction. I'd gotten his way with engines. Both of us had learned how to pack a truck properly and work through the night when necessary. The couch went first, then the entertainment center with my TV and sound system. Amanda had always complained that it was too big for the space, but she'd never minded watching Netflix on it every night for 2 years. Her expensive throw pillows looked lost and small scattered on the carpet where the couch used to be. "This is a lot of stuff," Matt observed as we maneuvered my dresser down the narrow hallway. 3 years of my life," I replied. "Turns out most of it was actually mine to begin with." We loaded box after box of books, tools, kitchen equipment, and personal items. Amanda had expensive taste in decorative objects, but when it came to practical things, the coffee maker, the good knives, the tool kit, the first aid supplies, she'd always been happy to let me handle the purchasing decisions. By 3 a.m., the apartment looked like a crime scene. Empty spaces on the walls where my posters had hung, bare shelves where my books had lived, a kitchen with nothing but her fancy wine glasses and the organic tea she never drank. I saved the bedroom for last. My clothes filled 2 large boxes. My books from the nightstand fit in a small bag. The lamp I'd bought at a garage sale during our first month together unplugged easily from the wall. Amanda's side of the room remained untouched. Her jewelry box, her collection of expensive skincare products, her walk-in closet full of clothes that cost more than I made in a month. But the space felt hollow now, like a stage set missing half its props. I sat down at the kitchen table one last time and pulled out a piece of paper from the junk drawer. Amanda always kept expensive stationery for thank you notes to clients, but a simple notebook page seemed more appropriate for what I had to say. You were clear. I took the exit. I signed it with just my initial and left it in the center of the table next to my key. "That's it?" Matt asked as we loaded the last box into his truck. "That's it? Where are you going to stay?" "Your couch, if you'll have me, just until I figure something out." Matt nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He understood that some things needed to be processed in silence, that some decisions were too big for immediate analysis. We drove through the empty streets toward his house across town, my entire life packed into the back of a pickup truck. I felt lighter than I had in months, like I'd been holding my breath for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to fill my lungs completely. My phone buzzed with a text message, and for a moment I thought Amanda had come home early, but it was just a notification from my bank app confirming the automatic transfer to our joint savings account. I made a mental note to close that account first thing Monday morning. "You okay?" Matt asked as we pulled into his driveway. I thought about Amanda coming home in a few hours, probably a little drunk, definitely expecting to find me waiting with the usual Friday night argument about her priorities. Instead, she'd find empty rooms and a note that used her own words against her. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. "I think I'm going to be just fine." I woke up on Matt's couch Saturday morning to the sound of my phone buzzing like an angry wasp against his coffee table. The caller ID showed Amanda's name, but I let it go to voicemail. Then it started buzzing again, and again. After the 7th call, Matt emerged from his kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and the kind of knowing look that older brothers perfect over decades of watching their siblings make questionable life choices. "She figured it out, huh?" he said, handing me a mug that read, "World's Okayest Dad," a Father's Day gift from his 8-year-old daughter. "Seems like it." I took a sip of coffee and watched my phone light up with another incoming call. "She's persistent, I'll give her that." "You going to answer?" "Nope." The call stopped around noon, replaced by a series of increasingly frantic text messages that I could see previews of without actually opening them. "Jake, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. Call me back right now." I spent the day helping Matt install new kitchen cabinets in a house he was flipping, grateful for work that required focus and left no room for overthinking. Physical labor had always been my therapy, whether it was rebuilding an engine or swinging a hammer. There was something honest about it, something that made sense in a way that relationships apparently didn't. By Sunday evening, the calls had stopped entirely, but I'd started getting texts from mutual friends. Sarah from the coffee shop where Amanda and I used to have weekend breakfast asked if everything was okay. Tom from my poker group mentioned that Amanda had called him looking for me. I realized I needed to get ahead of whatever story Amanda was telling, so I crafted a simple response that I sent to everyone who reached out. Amanda and I broke up. I moved out. I'm fine, staying with Matt for now. Thanks for checking on me. Short, honest, and impossible to argue with. Monday morning, I opened the shop early and threw myself into work. Mrs. Henderson's Mustang needed a new transmission, and I had a '98 Honda Civic with electrical problems that had been giving me nightmares for a week. Keeping my hands busy made it easier to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest that I wasn't quite ready to examine too closely. Around lunchtime, Jessica Moreau walked into my shop. Jessica was Amanda's best friend and closest colleague at Pinnacle Real Estate, a sharp-dressed woman in her early 40s who'd never made any secret of the fact that she thought Amanda was slumming it with a mechanic. She stood in the doorway like she was afraid the motor oil might stain her designer shoes, surveying my domain with barely concealed distaste. "Jake," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "We need to talk." I didn't look up from the Honda's dashboard, where I was tracing a short circuit that had been eluding me for 3 days. "Do we?" "Amanda is devastated. She's been crying for 2 days straight." "That's unfortunate." Jessica stepped further into the shop, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. "Look, I know you two have been having problems, but running away in the middle of the night? That's pretty dramatic, even for you." Now I did look up, setting down my multimeter and giving Jessica the full attention she was clearly expecting. "Running away? Is that what she told you?" "She told me you disappeared without a word, took everything, and left her a cryptic note. She's worried sick about you." I almost laughed. Almost. "Jessica, did Amanda happen to mention what she said to me before she left for her Friday night clubbing adventure?" Jessica's expression shifted slightly, a tell that suggested Amanda's version of events might have been somewhat edited. "She said you two had an argument about her social life." "She told me that if I didn't like her clubbing every Friday, I knew where the door was, then she left. I used her suggestion." I picked up the multimeter again, mostly to have something to do with my hands. I'm not sure what part of that counts as running away. "You didn't have to take it literally." "Why not? She seemed pretty clear about her feelings." Jessica was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to spin this back in Amanda's favor. It was the same calculating look I'd seen her use with difficult clients, the expression of someone who made her living convincing people to see things from a different angle. "She misses you," Jessica said finally. "She made a mistake, and she knows it, but you're both adults. Surely you can work this out without all the drama." "The drama was her idea," I pointed out. "I just followed her directions." "Jake, be serious. You lived together for 2 years. You can't just throw that away because of one stupid comment." I set down my tools and really looked at Jessica for the first time since she'd walked in. She was nervous, I realized, fidgeting with her purse strap, avoiding direct eye contact, speaking a little too fast. This wasn't just a friend trying to help patch up a relationship. This was damage control. "How's Amanda's work situation?" I asked casually. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is her boss happy with her performance lately? All that Friday night networking paying off?" Jessica's face went carefully blank. "Amanda is one of our top performers." "Good for her. I hope all those new friendships she's been cultivating are worth the investment." "What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged and turned back to the Honda. "Nothing. Just glad to hear she's building such a strong professional network. Brent seems like a real team player." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. When I glanced back at Jessica, her face had gone pale under her expensive makeup. "I should go," she said quickly. "Tell Amanda I said congratulations on her new priorities," I called after her as she hurried toward the door. "Sounds like she's got everything figured out." Jessica paused in the doorway, her hand on the frame. For a moment, I thought she might turn around and say something honest, something that acknowledged the real reason behind her visit. Instead, she just shook her head and walked away, her heels clicking rapidly across the parking lot. I went back to tracing the electrical short, but my mind was elsewhere. Jessica's reaction to Brent's name had confirmed what I'd already suspected based on Amanda's secretive texting and her sudden enthusiasm for Friday night networking. The only question was how long it had been going on and who else knew about it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Brent from Amanda's office. We should meet and talk." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I don't think we have anything to discuss." His response came immediately. "Actually, we do. Coffee shop on Main Street, 7 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Would you go to that meeting, or block both of them and disappear for good? Write in the comments. The audacity of it was almost impressive. Amanda's affair partner wanted to meet me for coffee like we were old friends working out a scheduling conflict. I wondered if this was his idea or if Amanda had put him up to it, maybe hoping he could charm his way into convincing me to come back and pretend I'd never figured out their little secret. I typed back, "See you at 7." If Brent wanted to talk, I was more than happy to listen. After all, I'd learned a lot about the value of clear communication lately. The coffee shop on Main Street was one of those aggressively trendy places that served $12 lattes and had more succulents than seating. I arrived at exactly 7 p.m. and spotted Brent immediately. He was the guy in the expensive suit checking his Rolex every 30 seconds while texting furiously on the latest iPhone. He looked exactly like what he was, a real estate agent who thought closing deals on overpriced condos made him a player. Mid-30s, gym membership tan, hair product that probably cost more than my grocery budget, and the kind of confident smile that had never been punched off his face. "Jake," he said, standing up as I approached his table. "Thanks for coming, man. I got you a coffee. Black, right? Amanda mentioned you keep it simple." The casual use of Amanda's name, the assumption about my coffee preferences, the way he'd positioned himself at a table in the back corner like we were conducting some kind of business deal, everything about the situation was designed to establish his control over the conversation. I sat down across from him and took a sip of the coffee. It was actually pretty good, which annoyed me more than it should have. "So," I said, setting down the cup, "what did you want to discuss?" Brent leaned forward, his expression shifting into what I assumed was his sincere mode. "Look, I know this is awkward, but I think there's been some misunderstanding about the situation with Amanda." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "She's really torn up about you leaving. She cares about you, Jake, a lot. And I think maybe you got the wrong idea about our friendship." I almost admired his approach, not quite denying the affair, but framing it as a friendship that I'd misinterpreted due to my own insecurities. It was smooth, practiced, the kind of manipulation that probably worked on people who weren't expecting it. "Your friendship?" I repeated. "Right. We work together. We hang out sometimes with the team. It's all very professional." He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. "I think maybe Amanda's enthusiasm about her new job came across as something it wasn't. And you're telling me this because I like you, man. Amanda talks about you all the time, your business, your integrity, the way you take care of people. I respect that." He leaned back in his chair, the picture of casual sincerity. "I'd hate to see a good relationship destroyed over a misunderstanding." I studied his face while he talked, noting the way his eyes never quite met mine, the slight tension in his jaw that suggested he was working harder at this conversation than he wanted to admit. This was a man who was used to getting what he wanted through charm and persistence, someone who'd probably never had to deal with actual consequences for his actions. "That's very thoughtful of you," I said, "but I think you might be misunderstanding the situation." "How so?" "I didn't leave Amanda because I was jealous of her work friends. I left because she told me to." Brent's smile faltered slightly. "She told you to leave?" Her exact words were, "If you don't like me clubbing every Friday, you know where the door is." So I used the door. Simple as that. "Come on, Jake. You know she didn't mean it literally." "Why not? She's a smart woman, successful in her career, perfectly capable of saying what she means. If she didn't want me to leave, she probably shouldn't have told me where the exit was." Brent was quiet for a moment, and I could see him recalculating his approach. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. He'd expected to find a heartbroken man eager to win back his girlfriend, someone he could manipulate into stepping aside gracefully. Instead, he was dealing with someone who'd already moved on. "Look," he said, dropping the friendly pretense, "Amanda made a mistake. She knows that now, but you're being pretty stubborn about this whole thing." "Am I?" "Yeah, you are. She wants to work things out, but you won't even take her calls. That's pretty immature, don't you think?" I took another sip of coffee and considered my response. Brent was getting frustrated, which meant he was about to start making mistakes. Men like him always did when their first approach didn't work. They got pushy, aggressive, revealed their true nature. "Tell me something, Brent," I said. "How long have you and Amanda been sleeping together?" The question hit him like a physical blow. His coffee cup rattled against the saucer as he set it down too quickly, and for a moment his carefully maintained composure cracked completely. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had gone tight. "Sure you do. The Friday night clubbing that started right after she met you, the secretive texting, the way Jessica practically ran out of my shop when I mentioned your name, the fact that you're here right now trying to convince me to take her back." I leaned forward slightly. The only question is whether this was planned or if it just happened. Brent's face had gone red, and I could see him struggling to decide between continuing the denial or shifting to a different strategy. He chose poorly. You know what, Jake? Maybe Amanda was right about you. Maybe you are too small time for someone with her ambitions. There it is, I said, settling back in my chair. I was wondering when the real Brent would show up. She deserves someone who can keep up with her, someone who understands her potential. You're just a mechanic who can't handle the fact that his girlfriend outgrew him. Actually, I'm a business owner who dodged a bullet, but I appreciate you making that clear. Brent stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're making a huge mistake. Amanda is an incredible woman, and you're throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you because of your own insecurities. Oh, probably, I agreed. Good luck with that incredible woman. I'm sure you two will be very happy together. He stared at me for a moment, clearly expecting a different reaction. When I didn't rise to the bait, didn't get angry or defensive or heartbroken, his expression shifted to something uglier. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost, he said. I won't. Brent stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving his expensive suit jacket draped over his chair and his half-finished latte cooling on the table. I sat there for a few more minutes, finishing my coffee and watching the evening crowd through the window. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Brent said you were horrible to him. What is wrong with you? I typed back. You were clear. I took the exit. Please stop contacting me. Then I blocked her number. The walk back to my truck gave me time to think about what had just happened. Brent's approach had been clumsy and obvious, but it told me everything I needed to know about how Amanda was handling our breakup. She wasn't devastated or heartbroken. She was angry that her safety net had disappeared before she was ready to let it go. I drove back to Matt's house feeling lighter than I had in months. The hollow feeling in my chest was still there, but it was smaller now, more manageable. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is let people show you who they really are. Matt was in his garage when I got back, working on his motorcycle with the kind of focused attention that ran in our family. He looked up when I walked in, grease on his hands and a question in his eyes. How'd it go? He asked. About like you'd expect. Amanda's boyfriend wanted to convince me to take her back. Her boyfriend wanted you to take her back? Apparently, I was cramping their style by disappearing before they were ready to make it official. Matt shook his head and turned back to his bike. Some people have no shame. No, I agreed. They really don't. I spent the rest of the evening helping Matt with his motorcycle, grateful for the familiar rhythm of tools and parts and problems that could actually be solved. Tomorrow I'd start looking for my own place, maybe something closer to the shop. Tonight, I was content to work with my hands and let my mind process everything that had happened. For the first time since Friday night, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Finding an apartment turned out to be easier than I'd expected. Mrs. Henderson, the owner of the Mustang I'd been working on, mentioned that she had a small place above her garage that she'd been thinking about renting out. It wasn't much, 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, living room that doubled as a dining room, but it was clean, affordable, and exactly 5 minutes from my shop. I don't need much, I told her as we stood in the empty space on Wednesday afternoon. Just somewhere quiet to sleep and maybe read a book. What about that girl of yours, Amanda? Mrs. Henderson asked. Will she be moving in too? No, ma'am. Amanda and I aren't together anymore. Mrs. Henderson nodded without asking for details, which I appreciated. She was old school that way, understood that some things were private matters that didn't need to be picked apart by well-meaning neighbors. First month and security deposit, she said. You can move in whenever you're ready. I wrote her a check on the spot. By Friday, I was officially living on my own for the first time in 3 years. Matt helped me move my stuff from his place, which took exactly 1 trip in his truck. It was remarkable how little space my possessions actually required when they weren't trying to coexist with someone else's vision of how life should look. The apartment felt like a blank canvas, full of possibilities I hadn't considered in years. I could put my vintage movie posters wherever I wanted. I could leave my books stacked on the coffee table without anyone complaining about the mess. I could eat cereal for dinner if I felt like it, or spend an entire Saturday rebuilding an engine in my living room. Freedom, it turned out, had a very specific smell: motor oil, coffee, and the absence of expensive perfume. I was hanging my favorite poster, the original bullet one-sheet I'd found at a garage sale years ago, when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Tom Morrison, my old poker buddy, holding a 6-pack of beer and wearing the kind of awkward expression that meant he had something difficult to say. Hey, Jake, he said. Thought you might want some company. Sure, come on in. Tom had been part of our regular Friday night poker group for almost 2 years, along with his wife Linda and 2 other couples from the neighborhood. Amanda had always complained that poker night was boring, but she'd tolerated it as one of my quirks, the way I tolerated her obsession with reality TV shows. We sat in my living room, such as it was, and opened our beers. Tom looked around the sparse space with the kind of careful neutrality that suggested he was trying not to have opinions about my living situation. "Nice place?" he said finally. "It's temporary, but it works." Tom nodded and took a long pull from his beer. "So, listen. I wanted to talk to you about poker night." "What about it?" "Well, the thing is..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Linda and Amanda have become pretty close lately. Shopping together, lunch dates, that kind of thing, and Amanda's been pretty upset about the breakup." I waited for him to continue, already knowing where this was heading. "Linda thinks it might be awkward if you keep coming to poker night, at least for a while, until things settle down." "Awkward for who?" "For Amanda. Linda invited her to join the group, and she's been coming the last couple weeks. She's actually pretty good at poker." I almost laughed. Of course, Amanda had managed to insert herself into my social circle, and of course she'd turned out to be good at poker. She'd always been excellent at reading people and knowing exactly what they wanted to hear. "So I'm out," I said. "It's not permanent," Tom said quickly. "Just until the dust settles, you know? Maybe in a few months when everyone's moved on." "Tom, it's fine. I understand." "You do?" "Sure. Amanda's the one who's upset, so Amanda gets to keep the friends. Makes perfect sense." Tom looked relieved that I wasn't going to make this difficult for him. I feel bad about it, but Linda's really adamant. She thinks Amanda needs the support right now. "What kind of support?" "Well, she's having a hard time with the whole thing. The breakup, living alone, all of it. Linda thinks she might be a little depressed." I nodded sympathetically while thinking about Brent's expensive coffee and Amanda's Friday night clubbing schedule. "That's rough. Good thing she has such caring friends." "Yeah, Linda's been great. She even helped Amanda redecorate the apartment, to help her move on." "They redecorated already?" "Last weekend. Linda said it looked too much like a bachelor pad with all your stuff gone, so they went shopping and bought some new furniture, paintings, that kind of thing. Really brightened the place up." I took a sip of beer and processed this information. It had been exactly 1 week since I'd moved out, and Amanda had already erased every trace of my presence from our shared space. She'd also managed to recruit my friends' wives as her personal support network and positioned herself as the victim in our breakup. It was actually impressive, in a sociopathic kind of way. "Well," I said, "sounds like she's handling things better than I thought." Tom finished his beer and stood up to leave. "I really am sorry about poker night, Jake. Maybe we can grab a beer sometime, just the 2 of us." "Sure," I said, knowing it would never happen. Tom was a decent guy, but he wasn't going to risk his wife's anger by maintaining a friendship with Amanda's ex-boyfriend. After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about the social dynamics I'd apparently been too naive to understand. Amanda hadn't just taken my friends, she'd taken them strategically, positioning herself as the wounded party who needed protection from my alleged bad behavior. I wondered what story she was telling them. Probably something about how I'd abandoned her without warning, how I was being vindictive and cruel by refusing to work things out. Maybe she'd even told them about Brent, but framed it as a new relationship that started after I left, not the reason I left in the first place. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed my shop's number, which was odd since I'd closed hours ago. "Jake's Auto Repair," I answered. "Jake, it's Linda Morrison." Tom's wife. This was unexpected. "Hi, Linda. What can I do for you?" "I'm at your shop. I was driving home from dinner and my car started making this horrible noise. I'm in the parking lot and I don't know what to do." I looked at my watch. It was almost 9 p.m. and Linda sounded genuinely distressed. "What kind of noise?" I asked, already reaching for my keys. "Like grinding or maybe scraping. It started when I turned into your parking lot and now the car won't move." "I'll be right there." I drove to the shop and found Linda standing next to her Honda Civic, looking worried and slightly embarrassed. The car was positioned at an odd angle in the parking lot, and I could see scrape marks on the asphalt behind the rear wheels. "What happened?" I asked, walking around the car to assess the situation. "I don't know. Everything was fine until I turned in here, and then there was this awful noise and the car just stopped moving." I crouched down and looked under the rear of the car. The problem was immediately obvious. The emergency brake cable had snapped, and the brake shoes were locked against the drums. It was the kind of mechanical failure that looked catastrophic, but was actually a relatively simple fix. "Good news," I said, standing up. "It's just a broken emergency brake cable. I can fix it right now if you want to wait, or you can leave the car here and I'll have it ready tomorrow morning. You can fix it now? Really? Give me 20 minutes. Linda looked so relieved I thought she might cry. Jake, you're a lifesaver. Tom told me you were upset about poker night, and I was worried you might not want to help me. Why wouldn't I want to help you? Well, because of the Amanda situation. I know it's awkward. I opened the shop and turned on the lights, then drove Linda's car into the bay. Linda, can I ask you something? Sure. What exactly did Amanda tell you about our breakup? Linda hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the question. She said you had a fight, and you moved out without talking to her about it. She said she came home and everything was gone. That's all? She said you'd been having problems for a while, and she thinks maybe you felt threatened by her success at work. I nodded and started gathering the tools I'd need for the repair. Did she mention what we fought about? Not specifically, just that you didn't like her going out with her work friends. I worked in silence for a few minutes, removing the rear wheel and accessing the brake assembly. Linda watched from a safe distance, occasionally asking questions about what I was doing. Linda, I said finally, did Amanda tell you she's been seeing someone from her office? The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. What do you mean? Linda asked finally. I mean, she's been having an affair with a guy named Brent for at least a couple months. The fight we had was because she told me that if I didn't like her Friday night clubbing, I knew where the door was, so I used the door. Linda didn't say anything for a long moment. When I glanced over at her, she was staring at the floor with a troubled expression. You're sure about this? She asked. Pretty sure. He asked me to meet him for coffee earlier this week to discuss the situation. He what? I finished installing the new brake cable and tested the mechanism. Everything moved smoothly, the way it was supposed to. Linda, I'm not telling you this to cause problems or to make Amanda look bad, but I think you should know that the story you're getting might not be the whole truth. I lowered the car and cleaned up my tools while Linda processed this information. When I was finished, she handed me $40 for the repair, which was more than I would have charged. Jake, she said as I was locking up the shop, I owe you an apology. For what? For believing her without asking for your side of the story. That wasn't fair. It's okay. People believe what they want to believe. Linda got in her car, then rolled down the window. For what it's worth, I think poker night is going to be a lot less interesting without you. Take care, Linda. I watched her drive away, then stood in the empty parking lot for a few minutes, thinking about truth and lies and the stories people tell themselves to make sense of complicated situations. Tomorrow, I decided, I was going to start building a life that didn't depend on other people's approval or understanding. Tonight, I was going to go home to my quiet apartment and read a book without anyone complaining about the lamp being too bright. It was a small thing, but it felt like a victory. 3 weeks after the poker night conversation, I was under the hood of a '95 Camaro when Jessica Moreau walked into my shop for the second time. Unlike her first visit, she didn't hesitate in the doorway or worry about her shoes. She walked straight to my workbench and waited for me to acknowledge her. We need to talk, she said. I didn't look up from the engine. Do we? It's about Amanda. What about her? Jessica was quiet for a moment, and when I glanced over, she was studying my face with the kind of intense focus that suggested this conversation was important to her in ways I didn't understand yet. She's in trouble, Jake. Real trouble. Now I did look up, setting down my wrench and giving her my full attention. What kind of trouble? The kind that could destroy her career and her reputation, the kind that could ruin her life. I leaned against the workbench and waited for her to continue. Jessica looked different than she had during her first visit. Less polished, more uncertain. Her expensive suit was wrinkled, and she kept fidgeting with her purse strap. Someone's been spreading rumors about her at the office, Jessica continued. About her relationship with Brent, about her professionalism, about her judgment. The partners are starting to ask questions. What kind of questions? About whether she can be trusted with important clients. About whether her personal life is affecting her work. About whether she represents the kind of image they want for the company. I absorbed this information while trying to figure out why Jessica was telling me about it. That's unfortunate, but I don't see what it has to do with me. The rumors started right after you two broke up. Someone's been talking, Jake. Someone who knows details about Amanda's personal life that only a few people would know. The implication was clear, and I almost laughed at the audacity of it. You think I'm spreading rumors about Amanda? Are you? Jessica, I haven't talked to anyone from Amanda's office except Brent, and that was only because he insisted on meeting me for coffee. I haven't talked to any of her clients or her boss or anyone else who could affect her career. Then who? I shrugged. Maybe the rumors are spreading because they're true. Maybe Amanda and Brent haven't been as discreet as they thought they were. Maybe someone else figured out what was going on. Jessica's expression shifted, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she looked genuinely worried. Jake, I need you to understand something. If Amanda loses her job, it's going to destroy her. This career is everything to her. Then maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to sleep with her coworker. It's not that simple, isn't it? Jessica was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with how much to tell me. Finally, she seemed to come to a decision. The affair with Brent wasn't Amanda's idea, she said. It was mine. The words hung in the air between us like a confession at a murder trial. I stared at Jessica, trying to process what she'd just admitted. Explain that, I said finally. Amanda was happy with you, comfortable, settled, content to live in that little apartment and spend her evenings watching movies with her mechanic boyfriend, but she had so much potential, Jake. She's smart and ambitious and capable of so much more than the life you two were building together. So you decided to break us up. I decided to show her what else was available. Brent was the perfect choice, successful, charming, connected to all the right people. I introduced them, encouraged their friendship, made sure they ended up at the same parties and networking events. And Amanda went along with this? At first, she resisted. She kept talking about you, about your relationship, about how she didn't want to hurt you, but Brent can be very persuasive when he wants something, and I kept reinforcing the idea that she deserved better than a small-town mechanic. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. How long did this take? About 3 months, from the time I introduced them until the night she told you about the door. 3 months of manipulation. 3 months of showing her possibilities she'd never considered. I turned back to the Camaro, mostly to give myself time to think. Jessica had just admitted to orchestrating the destruction of my relationship, but she'd done it in a way that suggested she thought she was doing Amanda a favor. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because it backfired. Amanda's not happy with Brent. She's miserable, actually, and the rumors about their affair are threatening to destroy everything I was trying to help her build. So, you want me to fix it? I want you to take her back. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed off the metal walls. You manipulated my girlfriend into cheating on me, destroyed my relationship, cost me my social circle, and now you want me to take her back because your plan didn't work out the way you expected? Jake, please. You don't understand how bad this has gotten. The partners at Pinnacle are conservative, old-fashioned. If they decide Amanda is a liability, she'll be blacklisted from every decent real estate firm in the state. That's not my problem. It could be your solution. Think about it. If you take Amanda back, if you two reconcile publicly, it changes the narrative. Instead of being the woman who cheated on her boyfriend, she becomes the woman who made a mistake and fought to win back the man she loves. I stared at Jessica, genuinely amazed by her audacity. You want me to help you spin Amanda's affair into a romantic redemption story. I want you to help the woman you loved for 3 years save her career and her future. The woman I loved didn't exist. You just admitted that everything about the last few months of our relationship was a lie. Jessica stepped closer, her voice taking on a desperate edge. Amanda does love you, Jake. She's been miserable since you left. She made a mistake, but people make mistakes. That doesn't mean you have to throw away everything you built together. We didn't build anything together. You built a house of cards and then knocked it down when it suited your purposes. So what? You're just going to let her life be ruined because you're too proud to forgive her? I picked up my wrench and turned back to the engine. I'm going to let Amanda deal with the consequences of her choices, the same way I had to deal with the consequences of mine. Jake, Jessica, I want you to leave, now, and I don't want you to come back. She stood there for another moment, clearly trying to think of some other angle to try. When nothing came to her, she turned and walked toward the door. You're making a mistake, she called back. You're letting your pride destroy any chance of happiness for both of you? Maybe, I said without looking up. But at least it's my mistake to make. After she left, I stood in the quiet shop and thought about everything she'd told me. Amanda's affair hadn't been a spontaneous betrayal or even a gradual drift away from our relationship. It had been a calculated campaign designed to break us up and redirect Amanda's life toward what Jessica considered a better path. The knowledge should have made me angrier, but instead I felt something like relief. For weeks, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I'd been too quick to leave, too stubborn to forgive, too proud to fight for what we'd had. Now I knew there had never been anything to fight for. Our relationship had been under attack from the inside, sabotaged by someone Amanda trusted completely. I finished the work on the Camaro and locked up the shop, then drove home to my quiet apartment above Mrs. Henderson's garage. I made myself dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and sauce from a jar, and sat in my living room reading a book about engine restoration. It was a simple evening, peaceful and uncomplicated. No drama, no manipulation, no hidden agendas. Just me and my thoughts and the sound of rain starting to fall against the windows. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace with my choices. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Amanda. Jessica told me what she said to you. We need to talk. Please." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations weren't worth having, no matter how much someone thought they needed to happen. 2 days after Jessica's confession, I was closing up the shop when I heard shouting from the parking lot. Through the window, I could see Brent standing next to his silver BMW, gesticulating wildly at someone on his phone. Even from a distance, I could tell he was furious about something. I finished locking up and walked toward my truck, not particularly interested in whatever crisis was consuming Amanda's boyfriend. But as I got closer, I couldn't help overhearing his side of the conversation. "Don't care what the partners think," he was saying. "This is ridiculous. We're both adults, and what we do outside of work is nobody's business." There was a pause while whoever was on the other end responded. "No, I'm not going to end it with Amanda. Why should I? Just because some people can't handle the fact that we're together?" Another pause, longer this time. "Fine. But this is discrimination, and you know it. I've been one of your top performers for 2 years, and now you're threatening my job because I'm dating a coworker?" Brent noticed me walking toward my truck and lowered his voice, but I could still hear enough to understand that his conversation with someone at Pinnacle Real Estate wasn't going well. "I have to go," he said finally, "but this isn't over." He ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring at his phone with the kind of expression that suggested his carefully constructed world was starting to collapse. "Rough day?" I asked as I unlocked my truck. Brent looked up, startled. For a moment I thought he might ignore me or storm off, but instead he seemed to deflate slightly. "You could say that," he said. "Work problems?" "Work problems, relationship problems, life problems," he laughed bitterly. "Turns out sleeping with a coworker is more complicated than I thought it would be." I leaned against my truck and studied his face. Brent looked like he'd aged 5 years since our coffee shop meeting. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was messed up, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "What happened?" I asked. "What happened is that someone's been spreading stories about Amanda and me around the office. Detailed stories about our relationship, about how long it's been going on, about..." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with sharing too much. "About how it started while she was still with me?" Brent nodded miserably. "The partners called us both in for separate meetings today, asked a lot of questions about our professional conduct, about whether our personal relationship was affecting our work performance. What did you tell them? The truth, that we're adults who developed feelings for each other, that our relationship is completely separate from our professional responsibilities, that we've never let personal matters interfere with client service." "And they believed you?" "I don't know, maybe. But they made it clear that they're watching us very closely now, and any hint of impropriety or unprofessional behavior will result in immediate termination." I thought about Jessica's visit 2 days earlier, her desperate attempt to get me to take Amanda back to salvage her reputation. It seemed like the situation at Pinnacle was even worse than she'd let on. "What about Amanda?" I asked. "How's she handling it?" Brent's expression darkened. "That's the other problem. She's not handling it well. She keeps talking about how this is all a mistake, how she never wanted any of this to happen." "Any of what?" "The affair, the relationship, the whole situation." He ran his hands through his hair. "She keeps saying she was happy before, that she should never have listened to Jessica's advice about expanding her horizons or whatever." This was interesting. Jessica gave her advice about your relationship? Jessica's been pushing Amanda toward me since the day they met. Always talking about how Amanda deserved better than a blue-collar boyfriend, how she should be with someone who could match her ambition and social status. Brent laughed bitterly. Turns out Jessica's idea of what Amanda needed and what Amanda actually wanted were two very different things. I absorbed this information while trying to piece together the full picture of what had happened to my relationship. Jessica hadn't just manipulated Amanda into cheating, she'd convinced her that she was settling for less than she deserved, that her happiness with me was actually a limitation on her potential. "So where does that leave you and Amanda now?" I asked. "I honestly don't know. She's been pulling away ever since the partners started asking questions. Last night she told me she thinks we should take a break until things settle down at work." "A break?" Her word, not mine. But I think what she really means is that she wants out of this whole situation. She wants to go back to her old life, back to... He gestured vaguely in my direction. Back to me. Yeah, which is pretty ironic, considering you're the one who started all these rumors in the first place. I stared at him. What makes you think I started the rumors? Come on, Jake. Who else would know the details about when our relationship started? Who else would have a motive to destroy Amanda's reputation at work? Brent, I haven't talked to anyone at your office except you. I don't even know who your partners are, let alone have any way to contact them. Then who? I thought about Jessica's desperation during her visit, her willingness to confess to manipulating Amanda, her panic about the rumors spreading at Pinnacle. A possibility occurred to me that I hadn't considered before. What if the rumors aren't coming from outside the office? I said. What if someone inside Pinnacle is spreading them? Why would anyone at work want to hurt Amanda? Maybe they're not trying to hurt Amanda. Maybe they're trying to hurt you. Brent was quiet for a moment, considering this. You think someone has it out for me? I think you should ask yourself who benefits if you and Amanda are both forced out of Pinnacle. Who moves up if you're no longer in the picture? I could see the wheels turning in Brent's head as he processed this possibility. He was starting to realize that his affair with Amanda might have made him vulnerable to office politics he hadn't anticipated. There is someone, he said slowly. Marcus Webb. He's been gunning for the senior associate position that I'm in line for. He's always resented the fact that I've outsold him 3 years running. Does Marcus know about your relationship with Amanda? He was at the Christmas party where Amanda and where we first connected. He saw us leave together. And he's been watching you since then? Brent nodded, his expression growing darker. He's been playing a long game, waiting for the right moment to use what he knew against us. Sounds like you have a problem. We have a problem. This affects Amanda too. I shook my head. No, Brent. You and Amanda have a problem. I'm just the guy who got out before the building collapsed. Brent stared at me for a moment, then laughed. A short, bitter sound. You know what the really ironic part is? Amanda was right about you. What do you mean? She always said you were smarter than people gave you credit for, that you saw things other people missed, that you understood people better than they understood themselves. He gestured around the parking lot. You saw this whole thing coming, didn't you? You knew it was going to end badly. I knew Amanda was lying to me about something. I didn't know what, but I knew our relationship was over. So you just walked away. I used the exit she showed me. Brent was quiet for a long moment, staring at his expensive car and probably calculating how much his lifestyle was going to change if he lost his job at Pinnacle. For what it's worth, he said finally. I'm sorry about how this all went down. Amanda's a good person who got caught up in a bad situation. She didn't deserve to have her life turned upside down. No, I agreed. She didn't. But that's what happens when you let other people make your decisions for you. I got in my truck and drove away, leaving Brent standing alone in the parking lot with his phone and his problems and his expensive car that might not be so easy to afford much longer. On the drive home, I thought about the conversation and what it revealed about the situation at Pinnacle Real Estate. Amanda and Brent were both in trouble, their careers potentially destroyed by an office rival who'd been patient enough to let them destroy themselves. Jessica's manipulation had backfired spectacularly, creating exactly the kind of professional scandal she'd been trying to help Amanda avoid. It was almost poetic in a dark way. Everyone involved had gotten exactly what they deserved, through their own choices and actions. My phone buzzed with another text from Amanda's number. Jake, please. I know you don't owe me anything, but I need to talk to you, just once, please. I read the message while sitting at a red light, then deleted it without responding. Some people never learned that consequences were permanent, that some mistakes couldn't be undone with apologies and explanations. Amanda was about to learn that lesson the hard way, and I wasn't going to interfere with her education. The light turned green, and I drove home to my quiet apartment, where no one was waiting to manipulate me or use me or convince me that I should sacrifice my peace of mind for their convenience. It was exactly where I wanted to be. The end came on a Thursday morning in late October, exactly 2 months after I'd walked out of the apartment Amanda and I had shared. I was replacing the brake pads on a customer's Honda when Mrs. Henderson knocked on the shop door, holding an envelope and wearing the kind of expression that suggested she had news I needed to hear. This came to my house by mistake, she said, handing me the envelope. It's addressed to you, but they put my street address instead of the shop address. The return address showed Pinnacle Real Estate, and the envelope had the weight and feel of something official. I thanked Mrs. Henderson and set the envelope aside until I finished with the Honda. When I finally opened it an hour later, I found a formal invitation to Pinnacle's annual client appreciation event. scheduled for the following Saturday evening at the Riverside Convention Center. It was the kind of high-end networking event that Amanda had always talked about attending, complete with cocktails, dinner, and speeches from the company's senior partners. At the bottom of the invitation, someone had written a handwritten note. "Jake, you should come. Trust me. Linda Morrison." I stared at the note for a long moment, trying to figure out why Tom's wife would want me at Amanda's company party. Linda and I hadn't spoken since the night I'd fixed her brake cable, though I'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd stopped being quite so supportive of Amanda's version of our breakup story. My first instinct was to throw the invitation away. I had no business at a Pinnacle real estate event, no desire to see Amanda or Brent or Jessica, and no interest in the kind of networking small talk that these events usually involved. But something about Linda's note nagged at me. She wasn't the type of person to issue casual invitations or waste time on meaningless gestures. If she thought I should be there, she probably had a good reason. I called her that evening. "Linda, it's Jake. I got your invitation." "Jake, I'm so glad you called. Are you going to come?" "I'm not sure that's a good idea. Amanda and I aren't exactly on speaking terms." "That's exactly why you should be there," Linda said. "Jake, there are things happening that you need to see for yourself. Things that affect you, even though you're not part of that world anymore." "What kind of things?" "I can't explain over the phone. But trust me, you'll want to witness this. And you'll want to be dressed nicely when you do." Something in her tone convinced me that this wasn't just about satisfying curiosity or settling old scores. Linda sounded like someone who'd discovered something important, something that required an audience. "What time does it start?" I asked. "Cocktails at 7, dinner at 8. Jake?" "Yeah? Bring a camera." The Riverside Convention Center was exactly the kind of venue I'd expected, all glass and chrome and expensive lighting, designed to impress clients and showcase success. I arrived at 7:30, dressed in the one good suit I owned, and immediately felt like I was infiltrating enemy territory. The cocktail hour was in full swing, with servers circulating through crowds of well-dressed real estate professionals and their equally well-dressed clients. I spotted Amanda almost immediately, standing near the bar in a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, laughing at something one of the senior partners was saying. She looked beautiful and confident and completely at ease in this world of expensive networking and careful social positioning. For a moment, I almost understood what Jessica had been trying to show her. This version of Amanda belonged here in a way that the woman who'd watched horror movies in sweatpants never had. Then I saw Brent, standing alone near the windows overlooking the river, holding a drink and checking his phone with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he wasn't enjoying the party. He looked isolated, like someone who'd been subtly but deliberately excluded from the conversations happening around him. "Jake!" Linda appeared at my elbow, looking elegant in a navy blue dress and carrying 2 glasses of wine. "You came. I wasn't sure you would." "I'm still not sure why I should be here," I said, accepting the wine. "Because you deserve to see how this story ends, and because Amanda deserves to have at least one person here who actually cares about her as a person, not as a business asset." Before I could ask what she meant, the lights dimmed and a voice over the sound system announced that dinner was about to be served. The crowd began moving toward the dining room, a sea of expensive suits and careful smiles. Linda guided me to a table near the back of the room, where Tom was waiting with several other couples I didn't recognize. The seating arrangement gave us a clear view of the head table, where the Pinnacle partners were seated along with their most important clients and top-performing agents. Amanda was at the head table, seated between 2 senior partners. Brent was 3 tables away, seated with what appeared to be junior associates and newer agents. The message was clear. Amanda was being celebrated while Brent was being marginalized. "Watch the speeches," Linda murmured as the salad course was served, "especially when they get to the awards." The dinner proceeded with the kind of careful choreography that expensive events required. Multiple courses, wine pairings, polite conversation about market trends and interest rates. I found myself relaxing slightly, remembering that I could actually be charming at these things when I wanted to be. After the main course, the senior partner stood up to begin the evening's presentation. He talked about Pinnacle's successful year, about market challenges and opportunities, about the importance of maintaining the company's reputation for integrity and professionalism. "This year," he continued, "we're particularly proud to recognize one of our agents who exemplifies everything we value at Pinnacle Real Estate, someone who has shown exceptional dedication to our clients, unwavering professional standards, and the kind of personal integrity that makes us proud to have her represent our company." I glanced over at Amanda's table and saw her straightening in her chair, a smile beginning to form on her face. "Amanda Richardson," the partner continued, "has not only been one of our top performers this year, but she's also demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of personal challenges. She's shown us all what it means to maintain professional excellence even when dealing with difficult circumstances in her private life." The applause was polite but enthusiastic. Amanda stood up, clearly surprised and pleased by the recognition. She looked radiant as she made her way to the podium, accepting congratulations from colleagues and clients along the way. "Thank you so much," she said into the microphone, her voice slightly shaky with emotion. "This recognition means more to me than I can express. This year has been challenging in many ways, but Pinnacle has been more than just a workplace for me. It's been a family, a support system, and a place where I've been able to grow both professionally and personally." She paused, scanning the room, and for a moment her eyes met mine. The surprise on her face was immediate and unmistakable, followed quickly by something that looked like panic. "I want to thank my colleagues for their support," she continued, her voice steadier now. "Especially Jessica Moreau, who has been an incredible mentor and friend. And I want to thank the partners for believing in me and giving me opportunities to succeed." The applause was warm and genuine. Amanda returned to her seat, looking flushed and happy, accepting congratulations from the people around her. Then the senior partner stood up again. "Before we conclude this evening," he said, "I want to address something that affects all of us at Pinnacle. As you know, we hold ourselves to the highest standards of professional conduct, both in our business practices and in our personal behavior." The room grew quiet, and I noticed several people glancing toward Brent's table. Recently, it came to our attention that one of our agents had been engaging in conduct that violated our company policies regarding workplace relationships and professional boundaries. After a thorough investigation, we determined that this individual's actions were incompatible with Pinnacle's values and standards. Brent had gone pale, his hands gripping his wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Effective immediately, Brent Morrison is no longer employed by Pinnacle Real Estate. We wish him well in his future endeavors. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Brent slowly stood up, his face a mask of controlled fury and humiliation. He looked around the room once, his gaze lingering on Amanda's shocked face, then walked toward the exit without saying a word. The senior partner waited until Brent had left before continuing. "I want to be clear that this decision was based solely on violations of company policy, not on any personal judgments about individual choices. However, we expect all of our agents to conduct themselves in a manner that reflects positively on Pinnacle's reputation." He looked directly at Amanda as he said this, and I saw her face crumble as she realized what was really happening. The award, the public praise, the emphasis on her resilience in the face of personal challenges, it was all theater, a carefully orchestrated public humiliation disguised as recognition. They weren't celebrating Amanda. They were making an example of her. "Now," the partner said, his tone brightening artificially, "let's move on to a more pleasant topic. Our expansion plans for next year." I stopped listening and focused on Amanda's face. She was trying to maintain her composure, but I could see the tears beginning to form in her eyes as the full scope of what had just happened became clear to her. Brent was gone, fired in the most public and humiliating way possible. Amanda was still employed, but she'd been marked as someone who'd been involved with him, someone whose judgment was questionable, someone who would never again be trusted with the company's most important clients or opportunities. Jessica, I noticed, was sitting at a table near the front, looking satisfied in a way that made my stomach turn. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted. Amanda was free of both Brent and me, available to be molded into whatever version of success Jessica thought she should pursue. "Jesus," Tom whispered. "That was brutal." "That was justice," Linda replied quietly. Brent destroyed his own career by thinking he could manipulate the system. Amanda's just collateral damage. I watched as Amanda excused herself from the head table and walked quickly toward the restroom, her composure finally cracking completely. Several people tried to stop her to offer congratulations on her award, but she brushed past them without responding. "I should go," I said, starting to stand up. "No," Linda said firmly, putting a hand on my arm. "You shouldn't. She made her choices, Jake. She has to live with the consequences." "She was manipulated. Jessica admitted it to me herself." "And Amanda chose to go along with that manipulation instead of fighting for what she had with you. That was her choice." I sat back down and watched the rest of the evening unfold like a slow-motion car accident. Amanda returned from the restroom with her makeup repaired and her smile firmly in place, but she looked fragile in a way that made me want to protect her despite everything that had happened. The evening concluded with more speeches and networking, but the energy had changed. Everyone was talking about Brent's firing, speculating about what he'd done and whether Amanda would be next. She spent the rest of the night fielding careful questions and reassuring clients that her personal life wouldn't affect her professional performance. I left before the official end of the event, walking out into the cool October air and feeling like I'd witnessed something that would change everything for everyone involved. My phone buzzed with a text as I reached my truck. "Thank you for coming tonight. I know it was hard to watch, but you needed to see who she really is now. Linda." I drove home thinking about justice and consequences and the difference between getting what you want and getting what you deserve. Amanda had wanted success and recognition and a life that matched her ambitions. She'd gotten all of those things, but they'd come at a cost she was only now beginning to understand. Brent had wanted Amanda and the status that came with her. He'd gotten both, briefly, and then lost everything when the game he'd been playing turned out to have rules he didn't understand. Jessica had wanted to reshape Amanda into her own image of success. She'd succeeded, but the result was a broken woman who'd lost everything that had actually made her happy. And me? I'd wanted honesty and loyalty and a partner who chose me every day. I hadn't gotten those things from Amanda, but I'd gotten something better. I'd learned to choose myself. My phone rang as I was climbing the stairs to my apartment. Amanda's number. I answered on the third ring. "Jake?" Her voice was small and broken, barely recognizable. "I'm here. I saw you at the dinner tonight. I can't believe you came." "Linda invited me." "Did you see what happened with Brent?" "I saw." "They destroyed him, Jake, in front of everyone, and they made it clear that I'm next if I step out of line again." I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside, not sure what she wanted me to say. "I'm sorry that happened," I said finally. "Are you? Really? Or are you glad that we're both getting what we deserve?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. "Amanda, I'm not glad that you're in pain. I never wanted to see you hurt. But you're not surprised." "No, I'm not surprised." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear her crying softly. "Jessica told me what she said to you," she said finally. "About how she manipulated me, about how the whole thing with Brent was her idea." "I know." "I want you to know that she was right about one thing. I did let her convince me that I deserved better than what we had. I let her make me believe that you were holding me back from something greater. And now? Now I know that what we had was the best thing in my life, and I threw it away for a fantasy that was never real." I sat down on my couch and stared at the wall where my bullet poster hung, thinking about forgiveness and second chances and the difference between understanding someone's mistakes and being willing to pay the price for them again. "Amanda," I said carefully, "what do you want from me?" "I want to come home. I want to fix this. I want us to try again." "That's not possible." "Why not? I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices, but people can change. I can change. It's not about change. It's about trust, and I don't trust you anymore." "So that's it? 3 years together and you're just going to throw it all away?" "I didn't throw it away, Amanda. You did. When you told me where the door was, when you chose Jessica's manipulation over our relationship, when you decided that what we had wasn't enough. I was confused. I was being manipulated by someone I trusted. You were an adult making choices, and those choices have consequences." She cried harder then, the kind of desperate sobbing that comes when someone finally understands that some things can't be undone. "I love you," she said through her tears. "I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but I do. I love you, and I'm sorry, and I would do anything to take it all back. I know you would, but you can't. So what happens now?" I thought about the question for a moment, looking around my small apartment with its simple furniture and quiet spaces and complete absence of drama. "Now you figure out how to build a life with the choices you made, and I continue building mine. Without me. Without you." She hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me alone with the silence and the weight of a conversation that felt like the real ending of our relationship. I sat in my living room for a long time that night, thinking about love and loss and the strange justice of watching people get exactly what they'd asked for, even when it wasn't what they'd really wanted. Amanda had asked for the door, and I'd used it. Now she was learning what it felt like to be on the other side.